I hope you had a wonderful Passover weekend. Hope you enjoyed the Masters. Hope you had a wonderful Palm Sunday, whatever your disposition is on Sundays. I hope you had a wonderful Sunday. It's a wonderful Monday because El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele was in the Oval Office with President Trump, and it turned into a tattoo Caitlin Collins day. I don't know why, but they turned to her, cut number 12.
Nationals of El Salvador under temporary protected status?
Do you plan to ask him?
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CBS.
So stop. Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor. It's not going to go well. Bukele is there to talk about the border, and it did not go well. So Caitlin asked, are you going to send back Mr. Garcia, whom the Fourth Circuit and the District Court and the Supreme Court's agreed that the Trump administration have to use best efforts. So we cut right through that, and here is President Bukele, cut number 13.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
How can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
So Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is there as well. This is what she says, cut 14.
Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
So cut number 16, Secretary Rubio jumps in.
These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point.
Okay, now wait a second, because at this point, Stephen Miller is going to take the floor for 2.5 minutes. Cut number 15.
Also respond to that question because, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
any
Court
help
is
to get
asking
him back?
to,
Is that
What was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría?
Now, the Supreme Court did say that the Trump administration must facilitate his return, but President Bukele said, not doing that. So that case is over. Donald Trump opened up today's meeting this way, cut number one.
Well, we had a terrible thing happen. We had an administration that allowed people to come in freely into our country from not only South America, but from all over the world, many from the Congo in Africa, Asia, all over the world, Europe, rough parts of Europe. And they came from prisons, and they came from mental institutions, and they came from gangs, and the gangs of Venezuela and other places. And hundreds of thousands and even millions of them came. 21 million people altogether, but many of the people that came, just a tremendous percentage of them were criminals, in some cases violent criminals. We had 11,088 known murderers. Half of them murdered more than one person. This was allowed by a man who, what he did to our country is just unbelievable. So we're straightening it out. We're getting him out. But what they did and what that party did to our country, open borders, anybody could come in. As soon as I heard that, I said, every prison's going to be emptied out into our country. That's what
I was
happened.
on from it, so it was a pretty fun morning in the Oval Office. It was a pretty fun weekend for me. I love Passover, Palm Sunday weekend when they coincide. Everyone's relaxed. I did get my 10 miles in down at the beach. Went down to Huntington Beach on Saturday. Greg, if you're listening, it was nice to meet you. I got stopped by Greg the contractor. Greg the contractor says, Hewitt. And I stopped my trundling. I may have been walking at that point. I don't think I set a record. I don't think I broke 14 minutes a mile, but I run, walk, trundle. And I stopped for 3 or 4 minutes. Had a wonderful chat. Turns out his frat brother is often on the Implacable Hill, which I went up this morning, 4 miles. I'm able to do that because of Relief Factor. And Greg, proving that he is a fine listener, said, did you take your Relief Factor today? And I said, yes, I did. Every day. I do it when I am, I didn't bring in a water bottle, so I'm going to have to take it in the next segment. I'll put it down there until then. The fact that I take my Relief Factor every day is so I can keep trundling and keep moving, and I want you to emulate me and be like Greg. Hear me. I take it, it works. Now, Greg's a contractor. I should have asked him, but we started talking about the fact how difficult the city of LA has made it for him to get to work in Pacific Palisades. Not making this up. They all have to take a particular route to go to the Pacific Palisades. It's like the first impediment to the free market among many. But that's exactly what it is. But Relief Factor makes it work. So take it every day. I'll take it an hour or two today because I got to get my water. But I will tell you this. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. 1-800, number 4, the word relief. Believe me, it will work for you. You won't feel minor aches and pains, or they'll go away quickly. And if you want to order it online, find the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Coming up today, Olivia Beavers and Dr. Orrin. Dr. Orrin's going to update us on what he thinks happened at the first round of the U.S.-Iran talks in Oman. Round 2 is going to be in Rome. I'll have on former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Senator Tom Cotton is coming by. Vic Mattos will be here, and Admiral Mark Montgomery. He is going to be retired United States Navy, bringing us up to speed on what that $150 billion in the new budget ought to go to. Stand by, don't go anywhere, except perhaps go sign up to and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you missed any of Friday's Weekend Review. All of it is there at my YouTube channel. Olivia Beavers is with the Wall Street Journal. She joins me. Olivia, good to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. Olivia, last week you were skeptical. I was skeptical that Mike Johnson was going to get the budget over the line, but he did. How surprised were you?
I think that that's sort of the theme of this year is that I'm repeatedly surprised because, in the past, if you're a reporter and you do sort of these, whip lists and see that they don't have the numbers, then you can, write authoritatively that, this bill might be in trouble. But this is sort of a different calculus when you have President Trump involved. You have Republicans who want to work with him. That being said, Republicans and leadership seem to indicate that, well, that was a tough vote that they had to get through. The toughest part is yet to come when they actually have to have, the underlying written text of what's getting cut, what's getting funded, and how much. And that's where you might see some, intense negotiations from the same budget hawks, the same Republicans scared about Medicaid, when you actually have, it all written out.
I agree with that. Now, Olivia, I don't know, and this isn't a quiz. I'll give you at least a week to figure this out. Is there going to be now that the one big beautiful bill passed, but now is there one reconciliation bill or are there many reconciliation trailer bills which are voted on differently? For example, they authorized $150 billion buildup in defense spending. That goes through armed services. Does the armed services provision for that then go directly to the House Armed Services and together they send it to their chamber? In other words, are we going to get 5 or 6 different reconciliation bills or one?
My understanding is that it's one. You do have the different committees writing it up to package it all together. But there are senators who are saying if it takes too long, I think that they're trying to have the package at the president's desk by Memorial Day, which is a pretty ambitious timeline to have this all written. And Senator Lindsey Graham and I think a few others are saying if we feel like they're dragging their feet, we're going to start pushing for it to be 2 separate bills. So
now,
that the talk of it done separately isn't over yet.
There are provisions for taxes. There are provisions for cuts. There are provisions for the border. There are provisions for oil and gas exploration. There are provisions for defense. 5 different authorizing committees. Someone mentioned, and I don't know who brought up the idea to the president, that we ought to raise rates on people who make more than $1 million a year. That's a horrible idea. Republicans are not for raising taxes, period. Whose idea is that? Who do we get mad at?
I don't know, but I know that leadership was asked about this last week when they were in. They're now on a 2-week recess around the Easter holiday. And leadership sort of gave space. They didn't, eagerly back it. They said, we're going to let, the president sort it out. He's throwing around a lot of things and basically seemed to create some distance from that idea. So, usually if there's an idea put out there, they'll leap on it if they're really embracive of it. But this is a party that's afraid to be seen as crossing the president, even if that's something that they don't immediately disagree. And I think because they didn't jump on and say we're behind it, that was a sign that leadership is a little bit against. And I think also Steve Scalise, that wasn't going to happen, if I remember correctly, separately to some reports.
Now, there are ways to raise revenue. I'm writing a column, I've already written, it'll be in tomorrow's Fox News, on how you can accelerate conversions of 401ks to Roth 401s and tax that conversion at a rate lower than the current the rate. And you'll encourage everyone to do that. I mean, they can raise a lot of revenue by incentives to do tax events, sell houses, all sorts of different things. But does that come out of Jason Smith's committee? Is that who will write that portion of the reconciliation?
That will be. He's the tax guy, and I think there already is a ton of lofty goals when it comes to taxes. There's the President Trump's 2017 tax cuts. There's Trump saying that he wants no tax on tips. And right now, I think what they're trying to do is figure out how the numbers work. As you know, we have talked about on your show, Republicans, both in the House and the House and the Senate have very different ideas of what those numbers should look like.
I know, Olivia, I have a completely unrelated question. Last week, one of my friends up there, Senator Jim Banks, just crushed some poor alleged HHS employee who proclaimed himself wrongfully discharged, and people weren't getting services. And Jim Banks says, you probably were rightly dismissed. Why? Because you're a clown. And then the doors closed. And it occurred to me that I've always wanted to ask you, who gets to go in the buildings to be annoyances to the legislators? I know you're a credentialed journalist, but can anyone show up with an iPhone and chase people down the hallway? Because that doesn't seem to me, especially in light of what happened to Josh Shapiro, to be a very good idea.
Well, so it's different if you're in the Capitol proper versus some of these Senate and House office buildings. So you go through, they're way more lax in the office buildings. So I'll see code pink, I'll see what we call trackers, or if they're a Democratic operative chasing out of Republicans, or a Republican operative chasing after Democrats, trying to ask them questions inside the building. Even though it's just, right after a tunnel of the Capitol. The Capitol, you have to be, properly toured around by someone who is credentialed, usually staff or members. So, I think in that situation that they caught the senator in the Senate office buildings, which is, a lot of people can kind of come in and out of there. They try to keep it open to the public. And
look, every time I've gone there because I've had an appointment with a senator or a congressman or a member of their staff. I would not object to the requirement of you be guided up to the office you're going to, or you be a credentialed member of the media and be prepared to show your credential. I just think it's crazy to let crazy people in there. How often do you see that happen?
I feel like I've been seeing, it depends what you just call crazy. I know my colleagues have seen some of the fired employees trying to ask senators in the way that you heard from Senator Banks. I have not personally seen them, but I see the Code Pink activists in like the Cannon Rotunda area, the Cannon office building, quite often these days. And the trackers are sort of give and take around, I think, big votes. They kind of just stand against the side of like a hallway, kind of like I do sometimes. So it's hard to figure out what they are.
Yeah, but you're doing your job. They're being an idiot. All right, Olivia, I want to thank you for being here. Next week, you'll tell me for sure if it's one bill or 5 bills or whatever. I really want to get the final scoop on that. Olivia_Beavers at X. She works for the Wall Street Journal. You can trust what she writes. She's here every week. Thank you, Olivia. Hey, Dwayne, I wanted to ask you something. MyPhDweightloss.com, 864-644. 1900, that's
864-644-1900.
I was watching some Guardians highlights.
What'd you do after that 30 seconds was over?
No, actually, they're only a game out. And my question is, do you think umpires are skinnier than you are? Have you started umpiring yet?
I actually hung it up this year because my league went woke.
You hung up the umpiring?
I hung up the mask. My league went woke.
I thought they got rid of you because you weren't heavy enough. I think that's it.
Nope, my league went woke.
Well, that's a story for another time. I noticed that all the umps are in better shape now.
A lot of the umps are younger than they used to be. There was kind of a generational shift over the last 4 or 5 years.
I think it's myPhDweightloss.com because
they have something to do with it.
They skinnied down our umpire who's now out of a job.
864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900.
Or go to myPhDweightloss.com and find out the benefits of no pills, no shots, just the old-fashioned way. Lose 50 pounds like Dwayne did, and you won't get fired from your umpiring job either. I have a story to tell you. I'm getting a second phone. Now, when I decided to get a second phone, first of all, this is my phone. You can tell because it's got Cleveland Brown orange on the back. It's an iPhone. And you don't even know my carrier, but I've had the same phone, same carrier. Not the same phone. I've changed the phone in the last 5 years. I had the same carrier for 25 years. And I've had the same email address for 10 and a grand total of 2 email addresses for 25 since I started the show. 25th anniversary of the show is July. So I've had the same phone number for 25 years, the same email. It begins the same way, and now it goes to a different, it used to be AOL, AOL collapsed. So I had to move the name over to it's my private number and my private email. But, you know, after 25 years, pretty much everybody in the world has my phone number and everybody in the world has my email address. So I have ways of sorting the email avalanche that hits every day, but there's nothing I can do about the phone. I'm not changing the phone number. Why? Because I'm a journalist, and people call me up with stuff that I haven't heard from in 10 years that I want to know about. But here's the problem. I literally have 3,000 contacts in here, and I can't take it into the White House when I've been to the White House. I can't take it in the old EOB. I can't take it in anywhere where there's going to be a sense. Not because I'm going into a skiff, but just because they don't want normal cell phones. So at the same time, 3,000 people, lots of texts, all sorts of spam, junk, ghost phone calls, all sorts of crazy stuff. I resolved. I want to be able to leave my phone on at night in the event. Of course, if the fishing Mrs. Hewitt is somewhere else, I want her to be able to call me here. And I have 3 kids and 7 grandchildren. So I want a number for 11 people. Actually, 14 people. My wife, my 3 kids, their 3 spouses, and my 7 grandkids. Nobody else. Nobody else is getting the second number. So I tell the sales force, I'm ready to get a second phone. And of course, there are a million cellular companies that want you to switch. But my good friend Kate said, I got one for you, Consumer Cellular. And I said, why? Well, you're over 50. Yes, I am. Their target demo is over 50. I said, that's interesting. Why is their target demo over 50? Because they sell it for $20 a month. I said, what? Rates as low as $20 a month? Yep. Because that rate is 8 gigs of data. Now, that's basically no data at all. It's a little data, but you're not going to stream on 8 gigs a month. You're going to get phone calls and text messages. I don't even know if you're going to get a lot of home movies. Harley's my tech guy. There's not much space. So they also put their call centers in the United States and staff them with real Americans who will answer the phone in under 20 seconds. They try and get it down to 15 seconds. You'll be talking to a live person. There's one menu between you and a live person. And if you want to switch, they make switching easier. It takes less than 20 minutes. So if you're spending way too much money on your cell phone and you don't want it, you go there too and make the switch in under 20 minutes. And you can be under $20 a month if you get like the plan I'm getting, the cheapskate plan, for a second phone. Because I'm finally getting a second phone, and I'm doing it with Consumer Cellular. So I want to give you the number for Consumer Cellular if you're going to do what I do, or if you just want to save money. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. That's going to get me a few times till I get it down. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. I'll get that down eventually. But I want you to know you get the second month completely free if you use the promo code Hugh. You can also go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Consumercellular.com/Hugh. Steelers fans, cellular has 2 L's in it and then another L. CELLULAR. Consumercellular.com/Hugh. I took this long to tell you about this because I think there are a lot of people like me who don't want to change anything but want a second phone. Then you want Consumer Cellular's 9 gig a month, 8 gig a month plan. And if you are someone who's just paying too much, and Big Cellular doesn't want you to know that there are alternatives out there with great service, the same, you won't notice the difference. Go to Consumer Cellular. If you're getting your first phone, go to Consumer Cellular. All right, 1-800-411-4454.
Iran wants to deal with us, but they don't know how. They really don't know how. We had a meeting with them on Saturday. We have another meeting scheduled next Saturday. I said, that's a long time. That's a long time. So I think they might be tapping us along. But Iran has to get rid of the concept of a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. He can't have a nuclear weapon. Nobody can have. We can't have anybody having nuclear weapons. You know?
Welcome back, America.
have
I'm Hugh
nuclear
Hewitt.
weapons.
That's President
And I
Donald
think-
Trump in the Oval Office with President Bukele of El Salvador, who doesn't want a nuclear weapon, as far as I know. But I'm joined by Ambassador Michael Oren, former ambassador of Israel to the United States. Ambassador Oren, is that enough for you to hear? Because I frankly don't know why we're having round two if the round one was 45 minutes. I can't hear you, Michael. No audio. So we'll fix that up. I will tell the audience, Steve Witkoff, President's ambassador without portfolio, is Harry Hopkins, has gone off to Oman and met with Iran's foreign minister, but it lasted 45 minutes. And then they said they're going to try and do it again on Saturday in Rome. Now, Rome is better than Oman because Oman is where a lot of the bad... Have I got a clearance here with Michael? Back with Dr. Oren? No, we're working on it. So let's listen to that again, what Donald Trump said to set this up. Cut number 3.
Iran wants to deal with us, but they don't know how. They really don't know how. We had a meeting with them on Saturday. We have another meeting scheduled next Saturday. I said, that's a long time. You know, that's a long time. So I think they might be tapping us along. But Iran has to get rid of the concept of a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. He can't have a nuclear weapon. Nobody can have. We can't have anybody having nuclear weapons. You know, we can't have nuclear weapons. And I think they're tapping us along because we're so used to dealing with stupid people in this country. And I had Iran perfect. You had no attacks. You would have never had October 7th in Israel, the attack by Hamas, because Iran was broke. They were stone cold broke when I was president.
All right, so
And I don't wanna do
they're
that. I want
tapping
them to
us
get rid-
along is a term of real estate, which I think means they're trying to fade us. Dr. Oren is joining me now by phone, I think. Dr. Oren, what do you think of the president's comments that they're tapping us along?
Well, that's okay. Of course they're tapping along. They're the Iranians. What do they expect? That's what they're best at. They're experts at tapping along. They're going to drag their feet. They're going to drag their feet so that the Russians can rebuild their air defense systems that were knocked out by the Israeli Air Force. They're going to drag their feet until they can get past the October deadline, at which point the UN snapback sanctions will expire. And that's a major goal for the Iranians. Of course, they're going for that. But I would like to hear more from the president, frankly. Yeah, they can't get a nuclear weapon. That's just what Biden said. That's what Obama said. There's other issues here. First of all, what are you prepared to do if they don't? And I think the president has been cleared by that there's a credible military threat on the table. But Iran is not just a nuclear program. Here's an opportunity. The Israeli government, the Israeli army, has presented the United States and the West with an historic military victory, subduing Hamas, pretty much knocking out Hezbollah, leading to the disintegration of Iran's Syrian ally. Iran is rendered vulnerable. This is an opportunity, not just to end Iran's nuclear program, but to end Iran's role as the source of 99.9% of violence and war in the Middle East, and Iran's role as the largest state sponsor of world terror. Why stop at the nuclear program?
Well, I agree with you. And the president's been very explicit. He said bombs will fall, bombs will drop. And today he said the people who've dealt with him in the past are very, very stupid, and they've grown used to stupid Americans, and I'm not stupid. And I don't think Witkoff's stupid. I don't know how many rounds you go, though, until either they open up every door and here are your flashlights, come on in, or they don't, right? I mean, how hard is this to find out if they're going to dismantle and comply?
Well, that's a question I have. Why don't they put a month, even 2 months deadline on it, and that's it. A hard stop, because they will drag it out. And the Iranians have floated an idea of a temporary pause or partial pause in their nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. Do not go down that rabbit hole. Do not go down there, because it'll lead to just another rabbit hole and another rabbit hole.
Is there a Yiddish term for, do you think I'm stupid? Because that's what the president needs to say.
I hope so, because every American leader I know for the last 20 years, except for President Trump, has fallen into that trap. And these guys, they claim they invented chess, and they claim they invented triple tiers chess. They're very good. They are very good. You got to give them credit for that. But this is an historic opportunity. It would be a historic tragedy to miss this opportunity to knock Iran or its regime out.
But Michael Oren, when you were ambassador, you had to deal with Ben Rhodes. You had to deal with Team Obama. You had to deal with John Kerry. You know the difference between that team and Secretary Rubio, Michael Waltz. I don't know if you know Steve Witkoff or not. I don't. These are Iran hawks. They're Iran realists. And the president is, too, tapping us along. That is we're almost there, I think. I'm encouraged.
Well, I know there are different schools, I think, in this administration. One school says, yes, we have to take advantage of this historic opportunity and KO the Iranian regime. The other school says, no, we've got to cut a deal. We've got to cut a deal. It's not America's interest to get involved in the Middle East. Let's turn around and go out. I see what some people tweeted during Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the Oval Office last week. And so there's competing schools of thought. I'm certainly there with Marco Rubio. I'm certainly there with Mike Waltz. I've written an article that sets out this case that I'm telling you right now, why this is a historic opportunity, and what could happen if we miss the historic opportunity. And if I have a second, I'll tell you, which is Iran comes back. You get an agreement that's just marginally better than the JCPOA. Iran's going to enrich itself again. It's going to rebuild Hamas. It's going to rebuild Hezbollah. It's going to rebuild the Houthis. It'll rebuild a Syrian regime. And we're going to be back on October 6, 2023, before you can blink.
All right. I am hopeful, Mr. Ambassador, not with this president. When someone says they're tapping us along, that means they're onto the gig. I hope that they're onto the gig. Where is your article, by the way?
Well, just to my chagrin, the Wall Street Journal didn't take it. Instead, they published a pro-JCPOA article by John Kerry. I don't get that. But I think I'm very disappointed. But this is an argument that has to be made. If we miss this, we're going to be back on October 6th.
We can't. I can't believe the Journal published Kerry. Michael Oren, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Harvard says it will fight Trump over administration demands. The government has threatened to withhold nearly $9 billion in grants and contracts. And Harvard President Ellen Garber, in response, says, no, we won't show you that we've stopped discriminating against Jews on campus, and whatever else he said. Meanwhile, professors sued Trump administration over Harvard funding cuts. A group of U.S. professors had sued Donald Trump's administration over its threat to withhold $8.7 billion, so that's not $9 billion, federal funding from Harvard. The lawsuit has been filed by the American Association of University Professors and its Harvard affiliate. It is one part of a growing effort by faculty, students, and alumni to push back against attacks by the Trump administration. Look, I'm a Harvard alum, and I want them to cut the money off. I want them to cut the money off last year. After they caught the Jewish kid in the yard, and that's clearly a violation of Title VI. They did nothing about it. Kids were afraid to go to Hillel. I thought they should have been cut off last year. But 7 elite U.S. universities, let's put air quotes around that elite, have so far had their federal grants frozen, and Princeton had $400 million in grants cut. Its president said this is the McCarthy era of the 1950s all over again. No, it's not. It's actually not. Title VI has been part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 since 1964, which came after the McCarthy era. It's got nothing to do with a loyalty test or whether or not you're a communist or spying for the Chi-Coms or the Russians or anybody else. It has to do with whether or not you're anti-Semitic and not protecting your Jewish students, and if you are unconstitutionally embracing DEI, which the Supreme Court has ruled quite conclusively. In fact, Harvard was the defendant in that case, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and the University of North Carolina. And the court said, once and for all, no more DEI, not now, not ever, never. And Harvard and all these other elite schools are continuing to do it. And they're not protecting their Jewish students. So no more money for you. Nothing. And I hope they just say no. You had a chance and you decided to grandstand, Professor Garber. President Garber, you're the acting president anyway. You're not really the president. I'm sure you're a nice guy. They're all nice people. They don't have a clue. They're afraid as well. They really are afraid of their own faculty. I'm telling you, here is the solution. Send every faculty member home and start over. Now, don't fire them. Pay them. They've got tenure. Pay them their say. You've got $50 billion, Harvard. I don't know what your faculty payroll is, but you're going to have to double it. Because you're going to have to put those people on indefinite paid leave forever. And then you're going to have to hire a bunch of serious people. Ask Larry Arnn. He'll give you some help over at Hillsdale. There are serious people who want to teach serious subjects. Close the ridiculous departments, anything with a hyphen in it, and get back to being a great university. And you'll have to spend some of your $50 billion, but we're not going to bail you out. On Friday, I joined Fox News as a contributor. And my very first question on my very first Fox News show as a contributor was from Brett Baer, and it was about President Trump's China tariffs. I said, Brett, I love them. They're long overdue. President's a China hawk. I'm a China hawk. Everyone in term one was a China hawk. Cut them off. Hard reset. Hard decouple. Well, maybe I was right. Maybe I was wrong. Let's check with someone who would know. Ambassador Robert C. O'Brien was the National Security Advisor under President Trump in Trump 1. He joins me now. Welcome back, Mr. Ambassador. Was I right? The China hawks are back?
Yeah, I think so. But first of all, congratulations on Fox. That's great. Finally got you off MSNBC, so it's what an improvement.
I would feel like your old boss would say the same thing, but go ahead.
No, listen, you're right on the China issue, and China did the exact wrong thing in response to President Trump's tariffs. They showed a lot of pride. They basically took their biggest customer, the USA, and told us to go to hell, and they're starting a trade war that ultimately they can't win. You can't win a trade war, Hugh, if you've got a surplus. It only goes bad for you.
Now, the president created exemptions today for Apple and for laptops. And I understand we don't want to hurt big American companies that can't decouple that quickly. How long do you expect that exemption to last for?
It's hard to say. It's certainly probably through the Christmas season, I would guess. But, a lot of it will be up to Apple and some of the other companies to see how quickly they can, retool factories in India and in America and start producing iPhones here, which will be a great thing. I mean, you recall we used to make Motorola phones in Texas.
Yeah, I would love for them to bring it to Ohio where it should be because we got the water and we got the power. Mr. Ambassador, the question then becomes, when does the negotiation begin? Because I want Jimmy Lai out of jail. I want Apple decoupled slowly. I don't want to get into a war with China, but I also want the country to realize they're polluting the heck out of their country. I don't mind a 10% base tariff with them as an environmental tax, if nothing else, and you've written that.
Well, they've been decoupling from us. Everyone talks about us decoupling from China. China has been decoupling from us for 20 years. They've been stealing all the technology they need, stealing our factories, building them in China, so that they can then become the sole supplier to the world for all the big, important tech issues, quantum computing, AI, batteries, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. So they're decoupling from us. They're trying to sanction-proof their economy so that if they make an action against Taiwan, that economic sanctions against them will be ineffective. And you're right about the pollution. I mean, the American companies can't compete with Chinese companies that use slave labor and don't adhere to environmental regulations. I mean, the Chinese have environmental regulations. It's just that they're not enforced. Whereas here, and you were a lawyer here, Hugh, you know what it's like for a manufacturing company in Texas or California or Ohio, and they've got the EPA inspectors all over them. They have to adhere to very rigorous environmental rules. The Chinese don't, and so as a result, they can sell things much cheaper. And that's exactly what President Trump was talking about when he talked about non-tariff trade barriers. Non-tariff trade barriers are things that countries do: currency manipulation, ignoring environmental regulations, slave labor, things that aren't necessarily tariffs but affect trade. And the lack of environmental regulation enforcement in China is a classic example of a non-tariff trade barrier.
Now, my Friday guest, John Ellis, forwarded to me an email from a West Point friend who quoted an East Asia scholar at Harvard saying, if Xi Jinping's economy does not grow by at least 3% a year, he's in trouble. If they have 2 consecutive years of under 3% growth, a regime may collapse. In other words, they got too many people to feed, demographic crisis, the pollution crisis. Do you think it's on shaky ground?
Well, China has a lot of problems. The CCP is relentless. They've got control over the entire country. They've got cameras everywhere. They've got their infamous algorithms to give people social credit scores, and they've got a lot of control. It's pretty Orwellian. So I'm not sure they're on shaky ground, but I'll tell you one thing: if their economy is collapsing or isn't growing fast enough, it's going to be very difficult for them to keep cranking out 100 ships a year and preparing for an invasion of Taiwan. So, whether they collapse or not, them having a slightly weakened economy certainly helps from a national security standpoint.
Now, I don't know if you saw the executive order on maritime buildup that was issued by President Trump last week. It has the fingerprints of all your old friends on it, of course, and I hope it's doable. It's got 21 paragraphs in it. Is that doable? I mean, can we really return shipbuilding to the United States?
I think we can. It's not going to happen overnight, of course. This has been a 50-year problem in the making, and the solution shouldn't take 50 years, but it's going to be faster than that. But we can return shipbuilding, and we're going to return the right kind of shipbuilding. We're going to have unmanned ships and unmanned submarines, and we do have smaller shipyards around the country that won't work and are innovative, but we're going to have to change the procurement system at the Pentagon. I think Pete Hegseth is trying to do that, but that maritime EO is a great executive order. Mike Waltz really shepherded it through at the National Security Council. I give him a lot of credit for it. And it maybe has a few fingerprints from past actions that we took when I was National Security Advisor and others. And Hugh, you've been talking about the Navy for years with me, and so you get some of the credit for it as well. But I think they're naval assault, and not just naval. People are concerned about American maritime supremacy and being able to ship commercial goods and not rely on Chinese ships to move our commerce around the world. And so there's a lot in there to unpack for navalists, but also for on the commercial shipping side and on the industrial base side. So it's a really important executive order, maybe the most consequential that's been signed so far.
Mr. Ambassador O'Brien, before I let you go, I want to play you Donald Trump today. Cut number 3, because I want you to translate what this means. Cut number 3.
Iran wants to deal with us, but they don't know how. They really don't know how. We had a meeting with them on Saturday. We have another meeting scheduled next Saturday. I said, that's a long time. That's a long time. So I think they might be tapping us along.
All right, Mr. O'Brien, what does translate, they might be tapping us along? What's that mean?
That's a classic President Trump term that he uses. It means they're going to delay negotiations. And, kind of in the real estate world, you call it pretend and extend. And they're going to try and keep negotiating with us until President Trump leaves office and until they get a nuclear weapon. And they've done that since 1979, since the revolution. They've done it to Republican and Democrat presidents, for forever. I don't think they understand, and this is why what President Trump was saying, that they don't know what to do. They don't understand President Trump. They know something different has happened. They don't understand the magnitude of it, and they don't understand that if they don't get rid of their nukes voluntarily, the nukes are going to be taken from them. The combination of beating Netanyahu and Donald Trump is something that the Iranians have never seen, and they should have been put on notice with the exquisite operation that the Israelis ran against Hezbollah, with the cell phones and with the attacks on Iran and the blunting of their missile strikes against Israel. They should have been put on notice by President Trump's strike on the Houthis. But, we'll see. But they better move quickly, because if they think they're going to just delay these negotiations and have talks about talks and meet every week, that's not going to go with this president. I saw a news report. I don't know if it's open source. I don't know if it's true or not, but it said we have 6 B-2 Spirit bombers on Diego Garcia. Now, those are our biggest bombers. They're stealthy. They carry bunker busters. And I don't know if we've ever forward deployed 6 of them to Diego Garcia in history. So there's a lot of firepower sitting off the coast of Iran.
If you can say so without revealing anything, how many days would a bombing campaign require to eliminate the Iranian nuclear sites? And there are at least a dozen of them.
Well, it depends on how it's run, but a combination of the U.S. and Israel and a lot of sorties, you could probably do it in a week.
That's what I wanted to know. Ambassador Robert C. O'Brien, always a pleasure to talk to you. Great piece on the environmental tax that China should be paying the world and is not. One of the non-tariff trade barriers that exist that is a reality. They're killing their country. They're going down the Silent Spring road of Rachel Carson. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Today is my great honor to welcome the 2024 College Football National Champions, the Ohio State University Buckeyes.
Wait, I didn't hear that
Today is
clearly.
my great honor to welcome the 2024 College Football National Champions, the Ohio State University Buckeyes.
President Trump welcomes the Ohio State University Buckeyes to the White House. I'm joined by Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, I have one question. Was it that much fun when the Arkansas Razorbacks went in?
Womp womp, Hugh, as my sons would say. I'm surprised you're not broadcasting live.
If they had thought about it, I would have gone. If they had wanted someone to absolutely lay down and to talk to everybody in the crowd, I would have done that. But did you see how happy those players were? Ohio, JD, your colleague, your former colleague, JD Vance, superintending the remark. It was a great day at the White House. Were you there, or did you snub them because you're an SEC guy?
I was not. I had to watch it from afar, like Hugh, like you did. But the baseball Razorbacks are doing pretty well. They're number 2 in the nation right now, I believe. So maybe we'll be hosting them at the White House after the College World Series this summer.
Okay, you send me that tape. Maybe I'll use that. All right, let's get to the serious thing. President Trump said in the Oval today about Iran, cut number 3.
Iran wants to deal with us, but they don't know how. They really don't know how. We had a meeting with them on Saturday. We have another meeting scheduled next Saturday. I said, that's a long time. That's a long time. So I think they might be tapping us along. But Iran has to get rid of the concept of a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. He can't have a nuclear weapon. Nobody can have. We can't have anybody having nuclear weapons. We can't have nuclear weapons. And I think they're tapping us along because we're so used to dealing with stupid people in this country.
Senator Cotton,
Iran.
First of all, that highly technical term, they're tapping us along. What do you think that means?
Oh, Hugh, I think he recognizes what Iran has been doing for some time, which is trying to drag out negotiations and interminable talks as they continue to race towards a nuclear weapon and missiles that can deliver that weapon not just to Israel and its Arab neighbors, but also to the United States, probably in fewer years than you have fingers on your hand. And President Trump has been clear that he's not going to allow them to engage in such interminable negotiations, that if they want a deal is to be had for them to surrender and dismantle their nuclear program, to stop their ballistic missile program that threatens us here in the United States, and to stop their support for terrorism. If they want to do those things, if they want to become a normal nation and come in from the cold, a deal is there to be had.
Now, I think it's a fairly simple deal, so I'm not worried that Mr. Witkoff doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with the Iranians. The people with a lot of experience dealing with the Iranians have got sold the rug 3 times.
I want them to.
Do you worry that Mr. Witkoff is not familiar with the regime?
Well, in the end, Hugh, Donald Trump is the one who's going to make the decisions, and he's very familiar with this regime. He's the one that nearly brought them to their knees by the end of his first term. He's the one who was targeted for assassination by the Ayatollahs for last year. So Donald Trump understands exactly with whom he's dealing, and I'm confident that he means what he says. He has been crystal clear about it, Hugh, multiple times in public since he took office. Iran will not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. They can either make a deal or they're going to get bombed. And he just says it that bluntly, Hugh. That's not even me saying it. That's Donald Trump saying it.
No, he said the bombs will fall.
Very different from how Joe Biden or how Barack Obama talks about that matter. For that matter, different from how Republicans for him talks. But it's the kind of frank, blunt talk for which Donald Trump is known and the American people expect.
Now, Senator, when I was on Special Report on Friday night, they opened up with a question about the China tariffs. Here's my response, cut number 21.
Syndicated radio host Hugh Hewitt, who is
Harley.
making his inaugural appearance as a Fox News contributor. Hugh, welcome to the Fox family. We're happy to have you on board.
I'm very glad to join you, Brett. Thank you for having me.
What do you make of this? Obviously the headlines reading about consumer sentiment a lot. The president finishes the week with the markets up, but there are questions, Hugh, about the China policy.
I like the China policy, Brett. I have been a hawk on China for a long time, as have Senator Cotton when he was in Congress, Representative Gallagher. The hard reset is what we needed. Donald Trump has brought it about. Carolyn Levitt noted from the podium today, they need our consumers, they need our markets. We're a $29 trillion economy. They're a $19 trillion economy, and they cheat. They cheat all the time, ever since they joined the WTO. So a hard reset, and if necessary, a hard decoupling, is in the best national security interest of the United States. I'm happy to see it. Did I get that right, Senator Cotton? And what would you have added had you been whispering in my ear?
Well, Hugh, that's mostly right. Congratulations, by the way, on becoming a new contributor at Fox News. I know their viewers have enjoyed your commentary there over the years, and we'll get to hear more of it now. If you had more time than you have on a television segment, you could expand and explain exactly why you need to take this kind of step. China has been waging an economic world war against us for decades. Many of our friends in the Democratic Party or the liberal media say that Donald Trump has started a trade war with China. That's not the case. We've been suffering from a trade war that China launched against us. We are now simply joining the battlefield and trying to stand up for America's workers and businesses because they have been subsidizing their own companies through state ownership, through tax breaks, through direct subsidies, through regulatory relief. And they've been attacking our companies through espionage, cyber attacks, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, non-tariff barriers, in addition to tariffs. Donald Trump did not start this trade war with China. He simply brought America finally onto the economic battlefield.
Now, I have both on my back set and right now in my hand, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, your new bestseller. Part 3 is China is Waging Economic World War. Is this continuing to sell well? I hope it is. I continue to push it to everyone so that they'll get a realistic view of what's going on with China. How is it continuing to get legs?
It has, Hugh, and I think that the news has generated some more attention to the book once again a couple months on from publication because, again, as I lay out in the book in fairly short, simple, straightforward way, China has been waging this war against us for decades. And now we're finally joining it on behalf of America's workers and businesses. And China, having waged this war and gotten wealthy and prosperous largely off of the short-sightedness of American policy, is what also has allowed them, for instance, to engage in the largest military buildup in the history of mankind in peacetime, and why they have become so aggressive towards the United States and their neighbors, most notably Taiwan. So we have seen more interest in 7 Things You Can't Say About China as the economic struggle for mastery between the United States and China has gotten even more intense.
If our confrontation with Iran escalates, we have maximum sanctions on Iran, where will China get the oil they need? I mean, Russia will sell them everything they want, but it's at $60 a barrel. Putin can't survive that way. I think the alliance of tyrants is in real trouble right now.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh, that would severely harm China's economy. They've been buying cut-rate oil from Iran for the last 4 years because Joe Biden refused to enforce sanctions on them. And as you say, Russia is struggling mightily as well because the price of oil has now fallen substantially on Donald Trump's watch, which is an underreported fact, both economically here at home and also from a strategic standpoint. So it would put China in a rock and a hard place.
Well, I recommend to the audience 7 Things You Can't Say About China. That's all you need to be a commentator in this era of 1-minute sound bites. Actually, you can be a commentator in a 10-minute soundbite if you read 7 Things You Can't Say About China. Thank you, Senator Cotton. Someday the Razorbacks will get to go to the White House, just not as long as Ryan Day's at Ohio State football. Joined by Ashley Klingon-Smith. Now, Ashley is a terrific get because she's the vice president of Americans for Prosperity, and tax day is right around the corner. But my reservation, Ashley, I read your bio. You are from Pittsburgh. Now, you had the good sense to go to Ohio for college at Denison. Then you went back to Duquesne, which is in Pittsburgh. I think you live in Pittsburgh. I think you are a Steelers fan.
Sir.
Am I right? Are you a Steelers fan?
I unapologetically, Hugh, yes.
You and Selena Zeno are the banes of my broadcast career. We let Yinzers in all the time, but we let Yinzers in around tax day when they know about tax day. What's AFP doing to underscore tax day robbing Americans blind this year?
Yeah, listen, I don't have to tell your audience. It is painful every single year when tomorrow rolls around, but we are letting folks know next year could be even worse if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is not extended. Tomorrow, we are going to have the heartbeat of our organization, our grassroots, activating across 30 states nationwide. We are hosting 60 grassroots events. We're going to be in districts where we've got members who have been on the record supporting these tax cuts being extended. We are going to give them reinforcement, some air cover. And then for the guys and gals who have failed to support this critical legislation and relief that folks went out in droves for in November, we're holding their feet to the fire tomorrow and making sure they feel the heat.
Now, Ashley, the budget passed last week, and that's great news. But now we need the
Yes.
reconciliation bill, and Olivia from the Wall Street Journal Beavers was telling me that's one big bill, then two. And that one's, even though it only requires 51 votes, that's the part that has got the small print in it. How do you feel about when that's going to get to the president's desk?
Yeah, listen, that's exactly right. Reconciliation, and especially in the House, is written across 11 committees of jurisdiction. But at the end of the day, we are asking folks living and residing in districts of all persuasions. And by the way, we've got 535 members between the House and the Senate to scale their voice. Go to protectprosperity.com, sign that petition there, share your story about how you have been positively impacted by this legislation and how a major tax hike, we're talking $4 trillion over the next decade here in Pennsylvania, that's $2,394 of a federal tax bill increase next year if Congress does not act for the average PA household. So this is consequential. It is going to have a real adverse impact if Congress cannot get this done.
ProtectProsperity.org. ProtectProsperity.org. That's where people get the petition. Where do they find out where the events are being held, Ashley?
That's right, on that website as well, or you can simply shoot us an email, info@afphq.org. I will field that, send you to the right place, but definitely protectprosperity.com. Check that out. Again, we are also asking for people to share their story there. We have collected scores. We are sharing them, many cases in district offices tomorrow. Congress has now gone home for Easter and the Passover holiday. And so we are definitely going to be heading into district offices, scaling the voices of folks in real time and many of the stories that have been shared right on that website.
Now, Ashley, we got a lot of Yinzers listening, so we have to slow down and make sure that they get it right. Is it, give me the website, whether it's .org or .com. I want to make sure at protectprosperity. What?
.com. You got it.
Protectprosperity.com. Ashley, there was some talk last week about raising the rate on the highest earners. I hate that idea. That reintroduces class warfare. We need to flatten the rates, not raise them. What do you think? Is AFP against that? I assume it is.
Absolutely. Look, spurring jobs is what we got from the 2017 legislation. 5 million jobs added between December of 17 until the pandemic hit in February of 20. You saw higher income, real wages and salaries were an estimated $3.6 trillion higher than projected prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and at least 870,000 Americans received immediate bonuses of $1,000 or more. This legislation was good for Main Streets across the nation. That is what the extension is going to do as well.
And more. It will do more. Americans for Prosperity is a great sponsor. Head to protectprosperity.com. Forgive her sins for being a Steelers fan. Protectprosperity.com.
Today is my great honor to welcome the 2024 college football national champions at the Ohio State University Buckeyes.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's the president today, and welcoming the Ohio State University national football champions to the White House. I'm welcoming Vic Mattas of Getting Hammered fame, because I didn't want you to miss that news, Vic. I just wanted to make sure. You're a Georgetown guy. They don't play football at Georgetown, right?
Oh, they have a great team in the Patriot League, Hugh. I don't know what you're talking about. For us versus Lehigh, one of the greatest rivalries of all time.
Do they really play football at Georgetown?
Division I, yes, the Patriot League. All the big schools play in that one. That's the cool league, you know.
Well, I know that they play basketball, and they were good once a long time ago, but I didn't realize they played football. Where is their football stadium?
It's right behind the lot there. You know, it's a stadium that is on campus. It's the kind of stadium that would fit inside, say, Notre Dame Stadium, or it would occupy like half the size of Ohio State's stadium. I understand that. But, you know, they try. They try with what they've got. And I have to say, I've been to many a Georgetown football tailgate, but I seem to keep missing the games.
Now, Vic, I used to get dragged by my dad to the Oberlin games, because he was a graduate of Oberlin, and they didn't even have a high school stadium. They had like 5 rows of bleachers. Is that what we're talking about at Georgetown?
No, it's slightly bigger than that. They got if you're flying into Reagan National and you happen to be on the left side of the plane, you're heading, north to south along the Potomac River, you look out your window, you will see Georgetown's football field. I will say the field.
Field. Okay. Okay. Hey, Vic, I listened to last week's Getting Hammered. I've heard you reference this a few times, so I'm not spilling any beans. You have gout. When did you discover you had gout?
It was probably around 2013, 2014, walking around New York City. I was with my wife at the time, and it really, really enjoying and indulging in everything that the city had to offer, which is, a lot of rich foods and drink, and wondering why my big toes started getting red, sore, and sensitive. And then it became a series of things. Got on some medication, got off it, and then realized I was in really great company with Ben Franklin, Samuel Johnson, and of course, kings like Henry VIII.
Most of the monarchs of Great Britain, and I think very Edwardian disease as well as of the Regency. My curiosity is, you wrote a book about vodka titled Vodka.
I did.
Is that perhaps indicative that maybe you ought not to drink vodka?
Yeah, you know what? I think I would like to say that the studies remain inconclusive, although people say there is a link between alcohol and having gout. I will also say you got to keep hydrated, drink plenty of water, and avoid certain things. I love shellfish. I love offals, Hugh. I know you're not a fan of liver and onions. I am, and that's one that'll always get a gout sufferer.
Well, tell me about. I was curious when I was listening to you and Mary Catherine talk about it. You assumed a lot of knowledge, not in evidence, as we say in the court world, that people had some idea. How painful is it?
At its worst, there's a great old, I think it's from the 19th century, illustration of a gout sufferer. And it's a book on gout, and it has a picture of like a little demon sinking its teeth into your big toe. And that's what it feels like. It's arthritis, essentially, Hugh. It's a form of arthritis where uric acid forms these crystals. At its worst, even moving your foot underneath a bed sheet is extremely painful and hot. It's like somebody has a flame underneath your foot.
So how many people have this?
I'd say a lot of Americans suffer from gout, certainly around the world. I don't have an actual percentage, but I know that I'm not alone. And it's not necessarily reflective of weight, shall we say, because
you're not a heavy guy.
No, I'm not. But it is also, Hugh, genetic. So my father has it, and then I have it. And one of the things you have to avoid is beer. And so that's really one of those things. That's why I stick to the clear spirits like gin martinis.
It just reminded Alan Simpson died last week, and my favorite Alan Simpson line was he was interviewing a witness, and he said, "Back when we were young and we thought beer was food." And when did it first evidence? In high school when you were drinking your first few beers, or when?
No. It was around 2013, 2014. I already had kids, and and it just middle age, Hugh. That's when it happens. Is middle age.
Boy, what a drag. So, Vic, you're better. Right? Is that the latest episode? Calm down.
Yeah, no. We are taping tomorrow, and we're going to do a special double episode so that we don't have to tape later in Holy Week, as you know. And the second episode will be a special tasting. You're going to love this one. It's a special Easter tasting that's going to be quite the treat. It'll come out on Friday.
On Good Friday, you're doing a tasting?
Well, we're taping ahead of time, so you might want to save it. If you don't want to listen to it on Friday, you can listen to it on Saturday.
Well, it depends what you're tasting. If you're tasting like nails and wood, it'll be fine. But if it's not, I'm not too sure that you're hitting the. By the way, you're Catholic. I'm Catholic. Do you mind that the Protestants are stealing all of our Lenten traditions? Like Protestants didn't used to do this, but now they're taking it all.
Well, no, of course. I mean, and I co-host a show, as you know, Getting Hammered with Mary Catherine, and she's a Protestant, and she'll tell me about the things that she's giving up for Lent, like, you know, the swear jar. And then later on, we'll go out to a dinner on Friday, and then she's eating a steak. So, they like to have it both ways.
It's a cafe Protestant. I've heard of cafe Catholics before, cafeteria Catholics, but I didn't hear about cafeteria Protestants before. All right, Vic, to wrap this up, in terms of Easter celebration, do you go to the first service, do you go to Saturday night Mass, or do you wait until the last chance Mass on Sunday?
No, morning Mass, Hugh, no music, which is kind of, I know, contrary to the mood and the celebration of Easter Sunday, but it is what I call a no-frills Mass. We get right down to business.
That's St. Mary's in Old Town. That's my favorite Mass in the Beltway, is absolutely...
Yeah, let's
Is that where you're going?
No, St. Agnes in Arlington. We like to cut to the chase.
I know. The early Masses in California insist on desultory music anyway, when in fact they would really encourage people to come. They always wonder, why are those Masses crowded? It's a message. Listen to your marketing people. Vic Mattis, have a happy Easter, my friend, and I'm glad you're feeling better.
Happy
I will
Easter,
be listening to the double episode in 2 parts. Not sure about Good Friday. Not sure that would be prudent. Might be Saturday episode for Vic and Mary Catherine. Getting Hammered. Coming up next hour, Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy, joins me to talk about President Trump's executive order on rebuilding America's maritime capacity. Overlooked in all the news of last week. It's a very, very big deal. Time for the market report, brought to you by our sponsor, American Federal. You can call Nick Rovich and his team at 1-800-221-7694. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see that right down below there, AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Nick and his team buy and sell gold. They sell you gold if you want to load up on some. They buy your gold if you, for whatever reason, want to liquidate some or all of your gold holdings or old jewelry or whatever it is that you want to get off your hands. If it is worth it, Nick and his team will buy it. They'll say it. They'll tell you how much it's worth. They'll take their commission, and you can trust them. That's the most important thing in this business when you're buying or selling gold. Do it with someone you can trust. That's Nick Rovich at AmericanFederal.com. The market today was all green. All right, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, it's all blue, but it's actually all green. The Dow was up 0.78%. The S&P was up 0.79%. The Dow was up 0.64%. And gold is at $3,226 an ounce. That's $3,226 an ounce. Now, Nick and I were exchanging emails when it touched 3,000 a few weeks ago. Nick thought it would hover around 3,000. In fact, it dropped down below, and now it's moved to top. I am not a prophet, nor the son of a prophet. All I know is that a well-managed portfolio will be balanced with some gold. If you're going to buy gold, do it from Nick Rovich, because he's been in the business for 40 years, and the team at American Federal or AmericanFederal.com is trustworthy, experienced, and they're not out to upsell you or anything else. They just want to sell you gold, take their commission. Everybody goes home happy. 800-221-7694. Now let's get to the Buckeyes at the White House with President Trump. This is so much fun. I may take more fun in this than anybody else, but it's so much fun. Here's J.D. Vance welcoming his alumni to the White House. Cut 26.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks to Coach Day and the entire team for being here at the White House. I'm so proud to be part of Team Scarlet and Gray today. Congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes on a hell of a 2024 season. I want to say just a couple of words about this team because they really helped make, sir, an incredible year even better for this very proud Ohio State alum. So two things. First of all, I made a bet with Ted Cruz over the Texas game, a bet that he is still not paid up on. Watch it on TV. And I don't like losing any bet, but I really don't want to lose a bet to Ted Cruz. So thank you all for helping me win that bet against Ted Cruz. And the second thing, I asked the president on January the 20th, I said, sir, would you mind if I skipped that final inaugural ball to go to the Ohio State National Championship game? And the president said, no, but we'll have him at the White House. So here we are, celebrating that national title.
There's a great day. There's more remarks, by the way, from Ryan Day, which I'll get to in hour number 3 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. I hope you are ready for a great Holy Week. I hope you're ready for a great Easter. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I want to go to the Oval Office sit down that President Trump had with President Bukele of El Salvador. It went on for a long time. A lot of ground was covered. A lot of questions were taken. Here are some highlights. Here's President Trump on trade and the tariffs, cut number 2.
Yesterday, you mentioned short-lived product exemptions. Which specific products are you considering, and how long is short-lived? Weeks, months?
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here, but they need a little bit of time. So I'm talking about things like that.
What about any Apple products, other cell phones?
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. And you have to be. You just can't have a wall and you'll only go. No, sometimes you have to go around it, under it, or above it. There'll be maybe things coming up. I speak to Tim Cook. I helped Tim Cook recently and that whole business. I don't want to hurt anybody, but the end result is we're going to get to the position of greatness for our country. We're the greatest economic power in the world if we're smart. If we're not smart, we're going to hurt our country very badly.
He kept talking about trade, cut number 5.
We're doing it because we want to make our own drugs. We're doing it because we want to make our own steel and aluminum, lumber, other things. And they're all coming in. We have record numbers, $7 trillion. Since I announced, like a month and a half ago, since I came in, we have over $7 trillion being invested in the country. We didn't have $1 trillion. We didn't have $500 billion for some of these guys. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. So we have the largest investment that we've ever heard of, and we're only 2 months in. And that'll continue at levels that you've never seen before. It's going to happen.
He took time to praise NVIDIA in specific terms, cut number 6.
You scored another major investment win this morning when NVIDIA pledged to build its AI supercomputer, the first time ever, right here in the United States.
Thank you. That's a question I like. That's true.
What is your reaction to this announcement, sir, and how will this positively benefit Americans across America?
Well, it's one of the biggest announcements you'll ever hear, because NVIDIA, as you know, controls that almost the entire sector, which is one of the most important sectors in the world, between chips and semiconductors and everything else. And they're the biggest. And the other biggest we already have coming in and spending $300 billion, as you know. They announced 2 weeks ago. But NVIDIA is so highly respected. And this was an announcement that a lot of people, I knew it was going to happen, but not to the extent that it happened. It's big. And the reason they did it is because of the election on November 5th and because of a thing called tariffs. As I say, the most beautiful word in the dictionary. After love, God, relationship, the press actually hit me and said, tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. What about family, love, God? I got hit even on that. You understand? I said, okay. So now I say it's my 5th most favorite word because they get you on anything. But that NVIDIA, it's one of the great companies of the world, modern, super modern companies, controls segments that nobody, sort of controls the world in a sense, and they're coming in here in the biggest way with hundreds of billions of dollars. Not like millions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, and I'm honored by it. And I want to thank Jensen and all of the people that we deal with. They're great people. They're brilliant people. And without tariffs, they wouldn't be doing it.
500 billion is a big number. The president also talked about Russia, its despicable attack yesterday, Ukraine, who he has brought to the table, but Russia is not coming to the table. Cut number 9.
Mr. President, you repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And have you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel. But I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened. And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country where 25% of its land is gone, and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You know, you haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do. They lose 2,500 young people a week, think on average. Now, they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000. We don't care. It's like whatever it is. They're not from your country. They're not from mine, but I want to stop it. 2,500, it's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look. I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
What he's trying to do is maintain the ability to talk to Putin. Putin makes that harder and harder. With the Palm Sunday attack that killed scores of children, he makes it harder and harder to believe he's other than a psychopath. But if anyone can get it done, it'll be Donald Trump. I'm not sure they'll be able to. I greatly appreciate Donald Trump's next comment, cut number 10.
Have you attributed a motive through the FBI investigation behind the attack on Governor Josh Shapiro over the weekend?
No, I haven't, but the attacker was not a fan of Trump, I understand, just from what I read and from what I've been told. The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job. And certainly a thing like that cannot be allowed to happen.
I think he's anti-Semitic. He attacked on Passover. Josh Shapiro is Jewish, as everybody knows, and he attacked on Passover. Could have killed the governor and his entire family. Not sure what the state police are doing in Pennsylvania. Horrific attack, and it can't be allowed to happen. Then they turn to the border. Cut number 11, Donald Trump talking about the border.
Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, 95%? It's incredible.
As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually. But it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question? Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
it's
great.
A crazy turnaround.
Christy, could you maybe say a couple of words about the border? How we're doing?
Yeah, the border is shut. I'm sure that onesies and twosies are getting through, but the biggest contrast between Donald Trump's first 2.5 months and Joe Biden's 4 years is that the Biden border was wide open and 20 million people came in. President says 21 million. I'm using the 20 million just because I don't know and you don't know, because there were lots of people who came in that we have no idea. And now it's shut. That might mean that there are still people coming in that we don't know about. They may be completely invisible to our eyes. There might be tunnels. There might be stuff. It requires a lot of time to repair the damage done by the Biden years. And I do want to play one more thing that he had to say from the Oval today, cut number 7.
And by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark. And one of the doctors said, "Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark." I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive. But I did do my physical, and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, "Sir, would you like
He's
to
older
take
than I
a
am
cognitive test?"
by a few years, so I took a look at his numbers. He's got a lab plate that anybody would want. At his, what is he, 78? Anybody would want that lab plate that came back on President Trump. And no one was asking him about his cognitive. Never asked Joe about anything. If you were watching Special Report on Friday, I was on the panel my first day as a Fox News contributor. And you do winners and losers on Friday's Special Report. Here are mine, cut number 23.
All right, Hugh, winner or loser?
Oh, the big winner is Cleveland because Joe Flacco, veteran NFL quarterback, is coming back. The big loser, anyone who's not watching the Masters on Sunday afternoon, it's the best day in sports all year round, watching the Masters on Sunday. All right, now I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm a loser. Because, well, it takes a little backstory. Marriages have got to have boundaries, right? Marriages have to have boundaries. And I've been married for 43 years. And my boundaries are very few. I watch the game, the Ohio State Buckeyes against that team up north. That's a given. I watch Browns games. Doesn't matter how good they are. They're not very good, but I watch them anyway. I watch all Guardians and Cavaliers playoff games, and there are some of the former and a lot of the latter over the last 43 years. Not many Browns playoffs games, but I watch those. And then I watch the Masters. Now, otherwise, fetching Mrs. Hewitt, you want to schedule something, fine. So the Masters are of particular interest in our home because in 1987, we were only 5 years married at the time. I was watching the Masters, and my lovely wife said, "I need you right now. Come help me." And I left the room for not 5 minutes. Missed Larry Mize's chip in. So then we elaborated the rule. I will not be asked to do anything during the Masters because Sunday afternoon, as I said on Special Report, all right, Sunday rolls around. What are you wearing? I said, to what? It's Masters weekend. We bought tickets to Bach's Passion of St. John Passion. And I said, oh, we did, didn't we? My sister-in-law was coming too. And I said, we did. You know, it's Sunday and it's the Masters. He said, I asked you and you said yes. And I confess I did. I did not check the calendar. So I am I am at fault here. If I had checked the calendar, I would have said, no way, not happening. But I didn't check the calendar. It was months ago. Remember Belushi and the Blues Brothers? When he confronts Carrie Fisher? Do we have that clip? I should have used, I'm not going, but it would have been about, I would have sounded like Belushi because she did ask me.
It wasn't my fault. You miserable slug. You think you can talk your way out of this? You betrayed me.
No, I didn't. Honest. I ran out of gas. I had a flat tire. I didn't have enough money for cab fare. My tux didn't come back from the cleaners. An old friend came in from out of town. Someone stole my car. There was an earthquake. A terrible flood. Locust. It wasn't my fault.
So that's pretty much what I was getting ready to do But then I was watching the leaderboard. I looked at it. Rory McIlroy is ahead by 6 strokes with 8 holes to go. And Justin Rose he's fading like the old guy that he is. He's 44. Only Nicklaus can pull this off. So I said, okay. I said, yes, we'll go. And so we drove all the way down. It was a beautiful performance of St. John's Passion, by the way. It takes 2.5 hours. There was an intermission. And magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. I was the Irvine or the Orange County Master Chorale at St. Andrew's Church in Newport Beach, California, yesterday from 3 to 5:30. Right when Rory McIlroy staged the biggest collapse and the biggest comeback and a 4-hole playoff. So this one is not Larry Mize chipping in. This one is not on the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt. This one is on me. There, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, Rory wins, finally, the career Grand Slam. He's from County Down, where the Hewitts are from. Every Hewitt that's not buried in America is buried in County Down. And at least the ones that got there after they moved down from Scotland. And he's a grand winner. Justin Rose would have been a grand winner. But Rory turned out, it was a grand winner. I did not see it. So I arrive on the patio, and I see some pals who also have friends singing in the thing, and whose wives have said, come, and they're there. And I said, and they said, you're not watching the Masters? I said, yeah, and you won't believe, the reason I left is that, don't tell us, we got it on record. And so I didn't. What I was prepared to tell them is, don't worry, guys. Rory McIlroy's running away with it. It's not really the Masters. I should have known. I said on special, can we play again what I said? Cut number 23.
All right, Hugh, winner and loser.
Oh, the big winner is Cleveland because Joe Flacco, veteran NFL quarterback, is coming back. The big loser, anyone who's not watching the Masters on Sunday afternoon, it's the best day in sports all year round, watching the Masters on Sunday. That's me. I'm the loser. I was not doing it, and every time I don't do it, I miss something like this. It's, by the way, people who don't golf watch the Masters. I used to golf. I'm a very good caddy. I still go out with people. I don't play anymore. I'm like Jack Nicklaus. I refuse to play anymore. And I will be happy to caddy with people and to go around the course with them. I love the game. It requires such an elegant combination of skill and concentration and indifference to crowds that is amazing to me. Talk about being in the zone. And Justin Rose had faded, and Rory was 6 or 7 strokes ahead, and I said, okay, I'll go. I was about to engage the failsafe, which is boundaries, Larry Mize. I was going to play my Larry Mize card and get out of going, but 6 strokes, what could possibly happen? I told the world what could I said it on Friday. You're a loser if you don't watch the Masters on Sunday. So it's me. That's on me. Let me get a little Ryan Day in here to cleanse my palate. Cut number 27, Ryan Day, coach of The Ohio State University National Championship Buckeyes at the White House today. Cut 27.
That's a really nice answer. We're going to have our captains. Give Mr. President, Mr. Vice President.
Them. The Ohio State University football helmet and Trump 47 jersey. Now, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, if you ask me, this is like the picture of the year, number 1 right there, JD and Ryan Day bookending it with their captain. And if you ask me, the 47 jersey ought to be framed and in the Oval because it's the greatest comeback club in history, right? They lost to that team up north and then rolled off 4 straight wins in the first ever 12-team playoff. First time. No one's ever done that. I don't know that it's ever going to happen again where you lose to your rival and then you go to the playoffs and you win 4 in a row from a low seed job against everybody in your way. You just run through them. So I think it's a good advice for President Trump to frame that jersey and put it up on the Oval. And people say, what's that doing there? I said, well, that's the greatest comeback in college football history, and I'm the greatest comeback in American presidential political history. And he would be right. I'm hooked on the feeling of watching like on endless loop the Buckeyes at the White House. Here's Coach Day, Ryan Day, at the White House today, making some remarks as President Trump and Vice President Vance welcome the national champions to the back of the White House lawn. Cut 28.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, and other distinguished guests, on behalf of The Ohio State University, the Department of Athletics, thank you for inviting the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes to the White House this afternoon. I'd like to thank Ohio State President Ted Carter, members of the Ohio delegation here with us today, Governor DeWine, Lieutenant Governor Tressel, Athletics Director Ross Bjork, and all the staff members for their work and efforts to make this trip to the White House a reality. We're honored and humbled to be here, celebrating with you our 9th national championship in our great university's history. To be here surrounded by our players, staff, university leadership is a moment we'll never forget. Traveling to D.C., though, was the easy part. Earning the right to be here was the hard one. This team made history by winning the most difficult series of games in the history of college football. Defeating number 7, Tennessee, number 1, Oregon in the Rose Bowl, number 3, Texas in the Cotton Bowl, and number 5, Notre Dame in the national championship. Back to back to back to back. No team's ever done that. And through discipline and execution, this team dominated, finished the mission, and left no doubt. It all started with a group of 4th and 5th year seniors. They chose each other. They chose Ohio State, and they built and lived a culture of brotherhood, toughness, and love. When adversity hit, they stood tall, stuck together, showed their true character, rose to the occasion, and became champions. There's a quote I love from President Roosevelt, displayed proudly in our team room, the man in the arena. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, who strives valiantly, comes up short again and again, but who does actually strive to do the deeds. This quote reminds us of the true honor that belongs to those who rise to the challenge and stand in the arena, unwavered. It took every challenge, and we responded with heart, with grit, and with determination. That's why this moment means so much to us. Our families, thank you so much for your love and your support along the way. To our coaches, thank you for your hard work and for your leadership. And to our players, thank you for everything. Your story will forever be told. And Mr. President, thank you again for this incredible honor. God bless America and go Bucks.
Go Bucks! Now, I got to play the tape, if you will, Harley, not the sound of the cut 27, while Ryan Day is arranging with the captains of the Buckeyes to give President Trump and Vice President Vance the sign helmet and jersey, Buckeye jersey, which is number 47. And, you know, a lot of people have jerseys framed, and this jersey, it says Trump 47. This jersey, that picture, by the way, is going to go on every wall. JD, the captains, Trump, and Ryan Day. Trump 47, there are a lot of framed jerseys all over the place. I saw one of Ronnie Lott at a USC hangout not long ago. All the USC people love Ronnie Lott. And that's fine. Ronnie Lott was good. Back in the days when USC had a football team. Now they're the homecoming game for most of the Big Ten. But Ronnie Lott jersey is framed and hanging in a place of prominence where the Trojans gather. Well, I think that 47 jersey should absolutely be framed and hung up between Old Hickory and FDR or Reagan or whoever. There's room in the Oval for a bunch of pictures. And they're all presidents. But it is the greatest comeback story in the history of college football. You lose to that team up north, and you're in the depths of depths. But because that was a fluke, the Buckeyes got an invite for a low seed in the 12-team playoff, and they proceeded, as Ryan Day said, to punch out. It never happened before. 4 top 10 teams in a row, including number 1, Oregon. And they did it not at the Ohio State University Horseshoe, though one game was there. 3 of 4 were on the road. And the greatest comeback ever, well, that's like 45-47. So 47 ought to be up there with the presidents. I think you could just point to it and say, that's the greatest comeback in college football history, so I put it up there since I have the greatest political comeback. That's my suggestion to the decorators at the Oval. Joined by Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy Senior Fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Admiral, welcome back. Last week, President Trump signed an executive order entitled Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. I can't read 21 paragraphs. I can read paragraph 2. It is the policy of the United States to revitalize and rebuild domestic maritime industries and workforce to promote national security and economic prosperity. Bravo, but he begins by pointing out we build less than 1% of the ships going on the ocean seas. China builds 50%. What do we do?
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me, Hugh. And what I'll say first is you're absolutely right. Those numbers are stark. We build 1% of the maritime shipbuilding out there, and a low percentage as well of the military shipbuilding. In other words, China's outbuilding us in warships about 4 or 5 to 1, and in maritime merchant shipping about 200 to 1. These are stark numbers. It's going to take a long time. It took us 50 years to get in this hole, really from like the mid 1980s. So maybe 40 years in the warships and probably about 50 years in the merchant ships to get in this hole. It's going to take us more than 4 years to get out of it. It's going to take a lot of innovation. It's going to take investments in the shipbuilding industrial base. That means enticing high school graduates to become welders, to become ship fitters, to become electricians that work. These are good paying jobs in these yards once you can get them. So it's giving contracts to the yard so they can then go out and get a coherent workforce. One of the problems that's really gotten us, Hugh, is the vagaries in the shipbuilding budgeting. In other words, one year you'll add a ship here, remove a ship there, add a ship here, based on either the service or the Department of Defense or the Office of Management and Budget or Congress making a change. That lack of consistency kills shipbuilding. It hurts aircraft, but to a lesser degree, but it kills shipbuilding. Shipbuilding is a unique military process. Unlike anything else in the defense industrial base, these individual things cost between $1 and $12 billion a piece. You can't have these vagaries. So first of all, consistency.
Now, do we have to use the yards that exist? Do we expand them, or can we build new ones in different places? And what's the easiest and less expensive way? And let me add one more question. Do you expect the authorizing committee in this reconciliation process? There's $150 billion of plus-up spending there that the Senate Armed Services Committee has to decide where to put.
So I'm going to answer yes to all your questions. And then I'm going to say on the reconciliation, let's say there's $150 billion. I think 35 to 40 billion is going to go to shipbuilding. I think an equal amount to Homeland Missile Defense or Golden Dome, to the nuclear enterprise, which is the Sentinel, and shipbuilding again with the Columbia class submarine. And then finally, there's this massive readiness debt in the Navy, Air Force, and Army, based on operations that we began conducting, particularly after October 7th, 2023, where they weren't paid for properly. So all 4 of those things are each going to get a cut of between 20 and 30% each. So I think 35 to 40 billion dollars. I think shipbuilding will be on the high end of that. So that'll come in there. Do we need more shipyards? Yes. Do we need to expand the shipyards we're in? Yes. Do we need to have both public and private shipyards doing this? Yes. And I'll give you one more, Hugh. I think that for some of the non-military ships, the support ships, oilers and such, we should even consider going to our good allies, Korea and Japan, who if that company agrees to make investments in U.S. shipbuilding as well as doing work in their yards, because they build ships better than us. They build ships like the Chinese build them at a cost of probably 25 to 28 cents on the dollar for a support ship of what you'd pay in the United States. So help us get better. In the meantime, in the short term, we'll give you contracts so we can have ships soon. And I think there's a good mix in there, but it's everything you said, Hugh, and then one.
Well, then, I agree with that. And it seems to me that the reconciliation process I think it's the Jones Act that prohibits us from doing that. I think we can amend whatever law prohibits us from doing that. But let me ask you about new shipyards. Where can we build them so that they're not all together? In an age of hypersonics, you really kind of have to spread stuff out, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I think this is some. I think I'm getting some kind of pull to Cleveland right here, and I'll just say generous that one of the answers here could be the Great Lakes on smaller on non like capital, non aircraft carrier kind of cruiser ship designs. I think that's reasonable. We build the Constellation class frigates in
Green Bay.
Wisconsin right now.
Yep.
Yeah, they come out. And they come out. So I feel that one of the answers is that, and our mutual friend Dr. Jerry Hendricks can't help but thump the table every time he hears that. He thinks what he's right about is that there's these fantastic engineering schools all over the Midwest. There,
Yes.
Purdue, Michigan, might be one other one in Ohio State. There's I think we've had enough Ohio State in this in the last hour. But my point is that you have the engineering work there. You have the high school kids that you can get at who were not in the Norfolk or Connecticut or San Diego or Washington State area where other shipyards are. So a fresh pool of kids to try to bring in. You really got to recruit kids, not just for the military now, but for the shipbuilding industrial base. It's critical that we have the STEM workforce, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics workforce coming out of our high schools. I think our schools are good enough. I don't think the focus is there to get the right workforce yet.
There's the California Maritime Academy, there's the Maine Maritime Academy, there's the Merchant Marine Academy. Is that part of the mix as well? Do they have to expand in order to make sure we have mariners for the 21st century and beyond?
That they're helpful, and they tend to produce the officer end of it, the first mate, second mate, third mate. I think we'll be okay there for a while. They do produce. We could probably, as we build that merchant marine, which we're not there yet. And by the way, I have to tell you, our civilian, the ships that get our equipment, our supplies, our troops, our weapons to the fight, they come from two areas: the military Sea-Lift Command, and the Department of Transportation, something called MARAD. Both of those are at about 40% of the ships they need. And in testimony, the Biden team would say, well, that's not such a big deal because we only have 40% of the people we need. And you're like, of course it's a big deal. You got to fix both of them, people and equipment.
Admiral, when I was a land use lawyer, Alameda Naval Air Station had been decommissioned. My client bought an option on it to see what we could build there. It turns out nothing. It's got endangered species all over it. It's got, there's so much pollution and there's nothing you can do with it. So it sits there. It's got like a vodka factory and some low-income housing. It's just sit there. Can we reopen some of the old stuff? Is that easier than building new stuff?
It's funny you should say that today. I happen to be north of San Francisco, and today as I drove up here, I drove through Mare Island because my grandfather had taken me there a lot. As a young kid, and I thought about Mare Island. I think about Philadelphia as well. I went to University of Pennsylvania, and we'd spend a lot of time at Philadelphia Naval Yard. Both of those are yards that could eventually come back, but the yards need new equipment, and that new equipment is going to take. I think that's where you lean on who's developed better technology for the use of that equipment. So from my perspective is there's an opportunity here, but the U.S. alone, we're going to need some partners, particularly Korean and Japanese shipbuilders.
Okay, let's close up there. The Korean and Japanese shipbuilders. Are there any prohibitions in their law, and I'm thinking particularly of the Japanese Constitution, that would prohibit them from building ships for our commercial fleet and perhaps for our military fleet?
I think the Koreans, we're not going to have to the Koreans. I am worried about with the Japanese, we would have to do some research on that. We already do work at two in Sasebo, and our ships in Yokosuka do work there already. So I feel good about those two.
Admiral, Roger Wicker is the chair of Armed Services, and I'm sure he's going to have a major hand in this. How specific do you think his staff ought to be when they come to writing the reconciliation bill about how to spend that $150 billion?
Well, I think you said the perfect answer recently, which was that he's going to have to put some relaxation of existing laws and and give some authorities to the government they don't have right now. So the short answer is he has to be very involved. The longer answer is he has to create the conditions for the Secretary of the Navy to be successful. And that includes any relaxations needed at the front end. The worst thing is to get halfway through a process and say, oh, now I need this authority. It costs you 12 months in appropriations. So the answer is yes. He has the right staff. He has a policy director, Rick Berger, that knows how to do this. And Senator Wickers, can give a master class in NDAA.
Well, that is good news. I hope they do that, and I hope they get to it very, very soon. Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you. Always a pleasure. Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. As always, appreciate your time. Thank you, Admiral. Not much else happened today besides the Buckeyes going to the White House. I mean, I'll bring you up to speed on that tomorrow, but the big thing of the day was, I hope you read about that. That's going to be all over Cleveland.com. I'll go home and listen to all the podcasts about the Buckeyes being there and what they said off the record. Do want to remind you, I'm in the ReliefFactor.com studio. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I hope you are. You can see the bag. I take it every day in the first hour of the program. I remind you in hours 2 and 3. Why do I do that? Well, because I did 4 miles today. I did 10 miles on Saturday, and I intend to keep doing it. I'm going back to the Beltway soon. It's warm there. The allergies will be up, but I'll still get it done. Then I head north, and I'll be doing it up there in the wilds of the Maine, because I just like to be outdoors, and I like not to feel minor aches and pains that come with trundling along, whether it's winter in California, spring and fall in Virginia, or the summer of Maine. Wherever I am, I take my Relief Factor, and I think you ought to too. If you make it a habit, you won't even think about it. If you put it in your car, if you put it next to where you shave, or in my case, it's right here in the studio and next to where I shave in the kitchen, so that you can not forget. You don't want to, it's not the end of the world if you miss a day. It isn't. But you want to get the levels of Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega up in your bodies, and you want to keep them there. $19.95 is a starter pack. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. If you want to order it right now for that less than $1 a day, $19.95 starter pack, or go to their website, ReliefFactor.com. ReliefFactor.com. Here's a bit of Dennis Prager to bid you over, by the way.
Here's a question that I once posed on the air. You know that periodically I will not comment. I am professionally paid to comment on life. Every so often I just ask a question and then hear from you, and I learn a lot. Have you lived the dreams that you had when you were young?
This is why you want to subscribe to Pragertopia. You're missing Dennis. We hope he's back in June. But in the meantime, Pragertopia.com is where you go to subscribe and get 2 hours a day of Dennis at Pragertopia.com.